Monday, everyone. Welcome to the Light Gate. We are coming to you live, or actually in pre-record, from the beautiful city of New Orleans in Louisiana at the United Public Radio Network at 107.7 FM and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM. We're on Facebook, we're on Roku, we're on Rumble, and we are on YouTube. We'd like to thank our sponsor. We have a sponsor on our network. It's Carnation. We love you very much. I want y'all to give them a go. They're awesome. I use them all the time. I don't promote anything that I don't use myself and really like, and I really love these guys. We have a wonderful show this evening, and I'm going to let Preston have it right away. Go, Preston.
Thank you, Dolly. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on episode 120 of The Light Gate. Yes, we're doing a pre-record because our guest is in the UK, and we can't force him to stay up till ungodly hours. So yeah, but we will be there in chat to interact with you guys. So excited about our guest tonight. I want to say a quick hi to you folks. I know some of you are regulars, so I'm guessing you're here. Peak and Louise, thank you, namaste. We love you very much. Bob Thorson. Who else do we probably have?
Leah, Michael Kennedy.
Cherise.
Yes. Louise should be showing up, and the list is endless. We could go on and on, actually.
Yeah, we love you guys. Thanks so much for joining us. This is going to be a very special show because our guest has written an absolutely outstanding, very entertaining, extremely enlightening book. I mean, I can't recommend it enough. Our guest, of course, is Simon Bown. And let me just tell you a little bit about him. If you haven't heard from him, you definitely should check out his stuff. He's got quite a bit of material. He's been at this for quite a long time. He is actually the host of two very influential and well-received podcasts. He's a clinical hypnotherapist and an author specializing in topics related to consciousness, reincarnation, and the afterlife. He has produced, wait for it, over 800 podcast episodes. Dolly, that makes me feel like a beginner.
Wow. Oh, wow. Royalty. Here we go. Okay.
Yes. He's engaged with leading experts and scholars in the fields of near-death experiences, of course, NDEs, but also reincarnation and the continuation of consciousness. His podcasts include the Alien UFO podcast. I've been honored to be a guest on that, and our Paranormal Afterlife, which have collectively garnered over, 6 million downloads. Amazing. Wow, Simon. That's crazy. With our Paranormal Afterlife podcast reaching #1 on the UK Apple Podcasts spirituality chart. Well done. Simon holds a diploma in clinical hypnotherapy and is certified in past life regression therapy. He has conducted hundreds of past life regression sessions, specializing in guiding individuals through these therapeutic processes. His research is informed by personal experiences with paranormal phenomena, including psychic flashes, UFO sightings, and other unexplained occurrences. Ooh, I definitely want to touch on that, Simon. These experiences have contributed to his academic interest in the nature of consciousness and its potential existence beyond the physical body. In addition to his work in podcasting and hypnotherapy, Simon is an avid bass guitarist and science fiction writer. I absolutely love that. I am not a professional guitar player, but I like to, tinkle at it. And yeah, I'm a huge fan of science fiction and have written quite a bit of it. So that is awesome, Simon. His latest book, and there are a few, is called Verified Near-Death Experiences, Proof of an Afterlife. Here's a picture of it. And let me see. It's very well received. An average Amazon rating of 4.6 out of 5 stars. Trust me, that's at the top. I want to just read a quick review on Amazon because this book is really amazing. Here's the review. It's very short. Just an excerpt, really. But here's what the review says. This book is absolutely fascinating and deeply moving. It demystifies death in a way that's both comforting and enlightening, helping readers understand that death is not the end, but a transition full of meaning and connection. It offers real stories, real people, which makes every chapter feel authentic, relatable, and credible. For skeptics and the curious alike, this is a must-read. Totally agree. I mean, it's an amazing book. I haven't finished it yet, but some of these stories, I mean, they are beyond poignant, very moving, really vivid. It's an easy read also, and just a great book all around. Before I pump him up any further, let me just bring him on.
Hello, Simon. Welcome to the Light Gate.
Hi, guys. It's great to be here. It's nice to see you.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on, and really appreciate it. I'm a huge fan, of course, as you can tell by my glowing reviews of your book. Amazing. I'm having so much fun reading it. I absolutely love this topic of near-death experiences. After my mom passed away, I really started reading those, and they saved my life. You know, I really needed to know that there was life after death. And your book is absolutely at the top of the charts there in terms of books I think people should read. You know, Raymond Moody and Melvin Morris, some great authors out there, PMH Atwater. But yours, wow. I haven't seen a book like this.
Oh, thanks a lot. It's high praise because you write so much, and you're like a machine. The amount of books that you put out. I wish I could write like you can, but thanks for that.
Yeah, well, it's exactly the kind of book I like to write, actually, and read true stories in the witnesses' words, and they're describing what happened to them. But before we get into it, as I warned you in the green room before the show, I love to talk to our guests and ask them what they were like as little kids. You know, were you skeptical of UFOs, the paranormal, life after death? What brought you to where you are today, to researching the subject, doing podcasting, and writing this amazing book?
Yeah, but I used to get books out of the local public library when I was 10 years old. Anything I could get about unexplained or supernatural stuff. So it could have been Bigfoot, ghosts, UFOs, anything. That would have been about 1976. So you're showing how old I am. Definitely no internet around in those days. And over time, I just got more and more books as the years passed. And Raymond Moody's book, I think, was 1976. It was published, but I didn't get hold of it till the 80s. But that was really interesting to me. But then I was also reading other books over time, like Batty Andresen Affair and Travis Walton's books.
Right.
And also, I used to go to the College of Psychic Studies in London, which was set up by the Society for Psychical Research about 140 years ago. And they had a fantastic library. And I wasn't a student there, but you could go there and learn mediumship and psychic stuff, channeling, past life regression. So I would go every couple of weeks, and you could pay a little bit of money, and the students could practice on you, their mediumship or what have you. It was always a thing for me of investigation. It was never that I was trying to contact a deceased loved one. It was, I would go just to see what came up. I was fascinated, and things would come up that you just can't explain how they could know that. And it was about 1987, I was taken through a past life regression, and that was quite an impact on me. And I just seemed to go straight into it, very hypnotizable, and had a strong connection to this past life. And so
Wait, can you elaborate? I'm intrigued. What past life did you remember?
Okay, well, it started off where I saw myself as a little girl in a park, and there was a dog running around, and there was the mother and father there, and they had a pram with a baby in it, and I just knew who they were and that this was our pet dog. And while I was lying back on this sort of bed in this room, I snuck my eyes open a little bit, and it's almost like I could see little feet where my knees were. And I could feel the grass between my toes as I was in that park. And it was a bit of a weird park because it was on a very steep slope. It was like this. And you know, town planners would look at that area, and the last thing they'd think is, oh, that's great for a park. We'll put one there. But a couple of years after this regression, I was in a place in North London I'd never been to before, and there was the park. exactly as I'd seen it in the regression. And the buildings around the park were exactly the same as the ones I saw in this regression.
Wow.
But then from there, we moved forward in that past life, and I saw myself as a nurse in the First World War. I was in France. There were all these soldiers coming off the front line with these terrible injuries. And I can remember the scene of this, how busy it was, how they'd be streaming in and we'd be running around like crazy. I also have a very strong sense of smell where it was almost like I was on the night shift and we were in this big canvas tent with maybe 4 or 5 beds going down each side. And there were these oil lamps there. And it's almost like I could smell the canvas or the oil lamps and the grass. And I had such a strong connection to it. And I've had these emotions as well. This feeling of being annoyed with my clothes. And this is not a feeling I would ever have, but the skirts were very long, right down to the floor. And we'd have to run around between the beds and the skirts would get caught on the end of the beds or on chairs and things. And it was like, oh, why do we have to dress like this? So I had that anger, but it felt like an old anger, like this had been annoying me for a while. But it was the first time for me in that regression. So that was weird how I got that connection to that. And
do you feel like that lifetime affected your current lifetime in any way? Is there any connections there?
I don't know, because I take people through past life regression therapy and we look for past life stuff that comes through into this life. And I've never done it for therapy. I've always just wanted to see what came up. And so moving on from there, I started reading books like in the 90s with Bud Hopkins and John Mack and all this near-death experience books that were starting to come out, as well as other things I was interested in. And my interests did start to go down 2 different roads. On the one side, afterlife, on the other side, UFOs. And in those days, they didn't really connect up. People weren't seeing the links between the 2 sides so much, which is becoming more and more obvious about how it's something to do with consciousness and this high strangeness stuff that shows up. And then I had a UFO sighting and I had psychic experiences and another UFO sighting.
Wait. I love UFOs. What happened with your sighting?
Well, one of them, I was gigging with my band in a town west of London, and it was a Sunday night blues thing. And we finished and packed up and I had all my gear in the car, and it's 1 a.m. on the Monday morning. I'm driving back into London on this motorway called the M40. And I remember noticing there were no other cars on this stretch of motorway, which was weird because it's heading into London, so it's always busy. And up ahead of me, there was really bright light coming off this empty field. And I drove this stretch a lot. I knew that was an empty field, and I thought, that's odd. And I slowed down to like maybe 5 miles an hour, checking my mirrors, no other cars around. And just as I got to this point where I could see what was in the field, I saw this craft about the size of a big house, shaped like a rugby ball. It was 25 feet off the ground, 200 feet from me. It didn't move an inch the whole time. It was completely silent. It had many, many red, like pin spot lights across one half of the bottom of it. And then a really powerful spotlight coming out of the other end, pointing at the ground. And I think back about that now and how it's a kind of thing in society or social media, this image of alien abduction and the light coming out of the UFO and the person being like a tractor beam taking them up.
What year?
This was about 92. So, I have wondered, did I see an abduction in progress? Also, I've wondered, did they let me see them? Were they there on purpose so I could see them because they were trying to give me a message? I'm not saying that I'm special or anything. Maybe they do this to lots of people. It's like on some kind of a path, like a spiritual path, and every now and then something happens, takes you the next step along the path, and maybe they thought now's the time for Simon to move another step. Or you might say, get a kick up the pants and say, look, pay attention, things are happening. But yeah, so I was doing like 5 miles an hour and I was leaning forward over my steering wheel, looking up at it. And eventually I got past where I couldn't see it and I increased my speed and went home. I knew enough to check the clock and there was no missing time. And
You're sure about that?
yeah,
Because I
and
mean, there's a couple of red flags there with no other traffic on the road. That I hear that quite a bit when a person has an onboard experience. And when something is that close, I mean, that's pretty unusual.
What is it?
Yeah.
Was it hanging? Was it on the ground or was it hanging in the air? Did it move at
It was
all?
in the air. It's in the air, just above some trees.
Okay.
Wow.
Was it stationary?
Yeah. Completely silent. And it's that thing you go through a mental checklist. You think, is it a hot air balloon? Is it aircraft? Is it a helicopter? I couldn't see it was any of those.
Skin of it. In other words, was it mostly lit up and you were seeing the light of it with other lights? Or could you see the skin of it?
No, I wouldn't say I could see the skin of it.
Okay, so
it was nighttime, and the red lights underneath it were very bright, and that they may have been too bright that you couldn't quite actually see the skin of it.
Okay.
Did you ever dream about the incident? I'm curious. That's another.
No.
Okay.
So you really didn't receive any mental image from it, no message, none of that. You just saw it, and you didn't see it take off and leave.
I just drove home. I didn't see them leave.
Yeah.
And
I hate to tell you about what you saw. You didn't see a UFO. You saw an engineered craft, and you're describing one exactly, one of the types that I know about. Exactly.
Oh, okay.
And
that's interesting. A little disappointing as well, but I suppose.
The governments of the world have been back engineering for quite some time, and that is one of the specific type that they have engineered. Okay. And the three things that you can notice is that it's not moving rapidly, it's not dipping, it's not wavering, it's not doing any of that. It's sitting static in the air and it's holding altitude, even though you can't hear it. Okay. And you passed it by. No UFO, no ET can do that. They have to, they're constantly maneuvering, they're constantly going away or coming in, and they would not stay that low to the ground because the electromagnetic radiation that they produce, the EMP that they employ to, the energy they employ would have knocked out the entire city, including your car. There's no way that was a UFO. No way. I do find it interesting though, that you're near London and that happened. That's a biggie. That's a real biggie. Biggie. For 1992, they were trying to get you to see it. Literally, you brought that up. You're wondering if that was true. That's your intuition going off. Somebody wanted you to see that. And I find that even more interesting. See what I'm saying?
What about your second sighting? Was that equally impressive?
The second one, I was, again, I did a gig. And this time I've moved to the South Coast. So I was driving across this area called the New Forest, which is a national forest. And so it's very restrictive there. You can't build in it. You certainly can't set up a whole bunch of lights or something. And if you drive through it, you have to go slow. They just have, the road's just wide enough for one car, and you'll come around a corner and there'll be a bunch of horses standing in the middle of the road. It's that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But there was one road that goes across it, a big one that's a dual carriageway. And so I was doing 50 miles an hour and I was heading north, and this was November and it was 7 p.m, I'd say. And so it was dark, and I could see off to my right, about half a mile away, there was an orange ball of light about the size of a car that was just sitting there. That didn't move an inch. And there were so many cars, there wasn't the opportunity to stop and take a look at it. But I was going along long enough that I could keep, look at the road and then look at it and then look at the road and then keep looking at it and staring at it.
I know that.
I wonder how many other drivers saw it.
Wow.
Did you feel like it was pacing with you? In other words, as you're going along at 50 miles an hour, you would have cleared it within 2 to 6 seconds. Okay. You would, less than.
Depending on its distance.
I don't know.
Because it was half a mile away.
Half a mile. Okay.
Half a mile away. And I'd say because there weren't.
How high?
Sorry.
How high
It
up?
was
Like
30
right in your
to,
driver's window, your passenger window? You saw it that level?
I'd say it was about 30, 40 feet, maybe 50 feet off the ground where it was. Because
Okay.
I went over to that spot a few weeks later to see what was there in case there was a building or something, but there wasn't. There's just trees there. And I imagine it was just above the trees that I saw that weren't very
Above the trees.
tall.
Okay, that's important to know. Above the trees. Then you were seeing something that was way higher than you realized. You were far enough away that you couldn't get the declination of it properly. That time and distance makes things look lower to the ground than they really are. They're really higher. And the orange, the fact that it was all orange, that is a UFO. You saw one. That's real.
And
So,
I had a weird synchronicity with it as well,
yeah.
which I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, and it was just a coincidence.
Well, what
But
happened?
I was driving back, so this is 2 a.m., and I'm listening to an interview, a podcast. It's Mike Cleland talking to Joe Montaldo.
Yeah.
Mike Cleland's talking about how he was at his house and he looked out the back window at night and there was a big ball of light out the back of the house and these 5 greys walking towards the house. And Joe Montaldo said to him, and you know what that ball of light was now, don't you? But Joe said it at exactly the same time I reached the spot where I saw that ball of light. So it was Montaldo was saying it to me.
Wow. I'm going to be talking to him tomorrow. I'm bringing that up. I'm not kidding. He's one of our producers. He owns UPRN. That's amazing. Wow.
I love the synchronicities in this field. There's a lot of them. That's
interesting. Yeah.
All right. Now you mentioned psychic flash. I hope you don't mind if I ask about that too. I love the psychic stuff.
Yeah.
I was going to see a friend in New Zealand. She was getting married, and it was 2 weeks before I was flying out. And she asked me to get her some just small, awful piece of kind of tourist stuff from London. And so I bought her a tea towel with the London Underground map on it. And I'm just walking down this area of London called Soho, where suddenly I had this vision of being in New Zealand with her. And I was sitting in the car with her and we were driving and she was talking about something and I could see the street names and I could see the houses, the particular way they looked in Christchurch in New Zealand. And that was about 30 seconds of time that I saw. So it definitely wasn't a deja vu sort of thing. But then 2 weeks later, I got there and it happened exactly as I'd seen it. The car was the same, the houses, the street names were the same, the conversation we were having. And I've never been to Christchurch before. I don't know what suburbia looks like there, but they have earthquakes and they have these houses that are a certain style and they were painted all these pastel colors. So yeah, that was some kind of psychic thing. I was connected to that point in time for 30 seconds. And it's not something I controlled. Oh, yeah. But she's kind of like, oh, typical Simon, yeah.
Yeah, you definitely OBE, or that tips me off to the fact that you do well doing that because once you leave, when you OBE, even if you've had NDEs, it'll happen to you as well. Your brain disconnects from this time and this space, okay? And you're able to wander out. You're more free with it. You have more of a connection to it, and so space-time is nothing when you're in that mode, okay? And it's possible to tell yourself or intuitively know that this is coming, this is what you're heading toward. It's self-precog. You could call it that, and you're anticipating what's coming, and your consciousness was already dipping into a little bit into the future for you and showing what you had something to look forward to. You did that. That's an ability. That's an absolute ability. And I bet it happens to you more than you're talking about. It's, I'm not kidding. It'll come in dreams sometimes. You'll dream about things and not have a lucid one, but it'll be dreamlike, and then, or you'll be doing something, suddenly you'll go, oh yeah, that's just like
it's very cool. I love it when that happens.
It's an absolute intuitive ability you have. That's really good. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I just wish I could control it.
Well,
but
yeah,
I had another experience, and this was during hypnosis. This is another UFO thing. I was taken through a past life regression by a woman who worked with Dolores Cannon. this QHHT technique for hypnosis. And we went into this past life, and I saw myself in Venice. I think it was the 17th century. And we went through this past life, and then I died in that past life, and I was this ball of light looking down on the body. And she just said to me, okay, now just drift away from that life, just drift away. And it was like somebody flicked a switch, and I went from 0 to 100 and terrified. And I saw myself in this classic thing of being on a low table with 3 greys around me, and I was naked. And the thing about it was that it was a past life regression. There was no talk of abductions and aliens. We were looking for past lives. Because there's some who might say, well, you were looking for it when you were hypnotized. It's a power of suggestion. So something, but that's not what we were doing. And so I saw myself on the table, and they did a couple of things to me. And I was so scared. And the lady said afterwards she could see my muscles quivering while we were doing this.
Wow.
And then it jumped, and I was off the table. I had a grey either side of me. And then I had this sudden vision that they put in my mind of being outside in this forest. And there was an area about the size of a football field that had been cleared. And I was with all these other adults. And there was a planet in the sky that was very close, too close for reality, because, the magnetic fields and gravity would interfere between the 2 planets. It was much closer than the moon. But there was a pathway coming from that planet coming down to where I was. And all these children dressed in white were coming down this pathway. And the adults were greeting them, and they were hugging, and it was all big smiles. And I remember the hypnotherapist said to me, oh, that sounds encouraging. But for some reason I said, no. I don't know why. I just felt, no, there's something wrong here. Then I had this message in my mind that said, when the planets meet, the children will return. And then after that, I found myself again with these greys, and they led me over to the wall. And it was just a flat wall, but then a hole opened up in it. And it was kind of a cookie cutter shape of me. And I went through it, and it didn't lead through to a room or a hallway. It was like a huge energetic space with all the colors of the rainbow swirling around. And I was suddenly doing 100 miles an hour through this space. And I was aware of other people, other humans, were all going the same direction. And I got into this long white room, kind of shaped vaguely like a train carriage, if you're in a train carriage. But it was all white, the ceilings, the floor, all these chairs coming out of the wall, like they were molded into the wall. They're just coming out. There was other people in there, and there were clothes. And there were 2 greys. I mean, I kind of got a message that said, no one goes home till you've got your clothes on. And then I walked down to the end where the greys were, and there was a hole in the floor, and I stepped into that hole. And the next thing, I'm in my flat in London. And I just went to bed and got up the next morning, went to work like nothing happened. So that whole memory popped up under hypnosis when we weren't looking for it.
And that was you in this current lifetime?
Yeah. Yeah. So
you think maybe you hit on contact? In other words, that you may have had contact and you're reliving it.
Sure sounds like
yeah. That may be it. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure that's it. You describe it a lot. That's real close to actually. Yep.
Sounds familiar to me. Yeah, I think you're a contactee.
Humans are weird. When we remember things, sometimes we remember them. Well, it's always from your perspective, okay? And whatever you've been involved in your life, whatever your belief systems are, all of that will, from your perspective, during contact, you will see things, hear things, and feel things the way you've been taught to see, feel, and hear them, okay? And your brain automatically tries to see what's there, but if you don't understand it, it'll fill information in for you while you're in that process, okay? And I find it interesting because you've described it really well just from an odd perspective. In other words, that's interesting. How old were you? In other words, were you an adult or were you a child? You're an adult, okay. Whoa, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it sounds like those details I hear a lot from people who are describing real experiences.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, so moving forward, what brought you to actually starting to interview people and doing a podcast and then writing books. And
Well, I was being taken through past life regressions every 2 or 3 years. I do it for fun, and
wow.
weird things showed up during it. And I got to this point where I thought, I want to do this. I want to take people through this. But I didn't want to just quickly learn how to do it. So I spent 10 months at a hypnotherapy college and learned clinical hypnotherapy, where I got my diploma. And that was all sorts of things, helping people stop smoking and lose weight and have phobias. And then I got certified in past life regression therapy. And the guy that I went with there, he was really good, because when I got that training, he doesn't let any people on his course unless he thinks they're good enough. There are people who run courses, they just want your money. They don't care about stuff. But I had to be interviewed to be allowed on the course. And I was also listening to a lot of podcasts. I was commuting 2.5 hours a day, so plenty of opportunity to listen. And being a musician for so long, I had recording software, and I know how to use it. And recording a voice talking is so easy compared to recording a band. And I started emailing people, asking them to be on the podcast, and they said yes. And it was like, this is great. I might have had 10 downloads, and I'm getting this person who's well known coming on the podcast. And
which podcast was first, the UFO one or the paranormal?
Oh, that
one?
was the paranormal one.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I was always worried about whether I've had enough questions and I knew what to talk about. So I would read their book. So I got all these questions, and I wanted to go really in depth and not just ask surface questions like, oh, so what is a near-death experience? I asked them stuff that's really detailed and getting into the interesting things. And I don't know if Preston's noticed that, but I always try to read his whole book before I interview him. So that's the way I work with both my podcasts, is reading these books. So after maybe 500 interview episodes, it's been like a real education, learning about so much of this stuff. And over time, I talked to so many people who had near-death experiences, who had these verifiable events. And there was no book out there about this. Lots of books about near-death experiences, but not focusing on these ones that had verifications, or, they call them veridical near-death experiences. There was one that's called The Self Does Not Die, that I think was 2007, and they would just focus on the verification event. But what I wanted to do was tell the whole near-death experience, about how it started, the whole spiritual side of it, when they were having the life review and meeting with soul guides or deceased loved ones and traveling in different parts of the universe, perhaps. So, it's like each chapter is about a different person and their experience. But then it also looks at the verification event. And what I mean by that is where a classic example is somebody dies on the operating table, and they're up at the ceiling looking down, and they watch what happens in their resuscitation. And then when they come back, they tell the doctors and nurses, I saw you do this and you did that. And they can say, but your heart was flatlined, your brain was flatlined, you were clinically dead. There's no way you could have seen that. So that's where the verification is, that they were out of their body and that they were watching what was happening. But the verifications get quite wide in the book, where people see things that are miles away from the hospital, or they see something during the near-death experience that then is later verified. So that's sort of part of my podcast is about, our paranormal afterlife. It's looking for evidence that consciousness continues. So I do talk to mediums on there, as well as people who have near-death experiences and people who study children with past lives. And so it's a whole afterlife kind of thing. Every single point I can pick out. I've talked to people who do out-of-body experiences at Monroe Institute, and I've talked to Russell Targ and Courtney Brown about remote viewing. So all sorts of things.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more evidence for life after death than people realize. NDEs, I think, are at the top of the list, but ghost sightings as well are very good evidence. Mediumship is also really amazing. I think that alone proves life after death. And the astral travelers, OBEers, those four alone, I think, provide absolutely conclusive proof. But it's funny to me because there are still skeptics out there who say, oh, it's all in your mind, and the near-death experience is the, quote, dying brain. That's what my mom thought, which is funny because I was taught this subject in grade school. They mentioned it. And even back then I thought, that can't be the explanation. This doesn't make sense. Even though I was skeptical, I was still a little questioning it because this subject, Raymond Moody's book, I don't know if you're aware of this, it sold 100,000 copies every year for like 10 years. This is how popular this subject is. So
yeah, I wish I could do that.
Right? I feel you. So
yeah, but I was going to say that the people don't know about really say how mediumship works for the medium, what they're actually doing and how they process the information that comes to them. And then I found these amazing things within physical mediumship, stuff that just sounds like Harry Potter magic in real life. And shall I tell you about one of these things I heard about?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Yes.
This was
for all the
Leslie
muggles
Kane.
out there.
This is Leslie Kane that told me this. So, she's a New York Times journalist, a serious person.
Yeah.
And this was the last chapter in her book, which is called Surviving Death. And she said it was so way out what she described. She didn't want to risk putting it at the front of the book and people would think she's too crazy. She had to lead them to it. And there's drawings of it in the book of what she saw. But she was with this physical medium in England called Stuart Alexander. And he was attached to a chair. And it's dark, but they had a red light underneath a small table with a glass top on it. He was cable tied, his wrists onto the arms on the chair, his legs to the legs of the chair. He had fluorescent strips on his knees and his arms. And either side of him, there was a person holding his hands. So what happened was she saw this white stuff coming out of him and slowly going down his body onto the floor. And then it came up over the top. Yeah, came up over the top of the table and it came together and formed a hand. And she heard a voice up at the ceiling say, "So, are you going to shake my hand?" So she took hold of this hand and she could feel the bones and the flesh, and it was quite cold. And she held on to it and let go, and then it just dissipated back into a mist and just went away back to Stuart Alexander. And that's just amazing. And you think
he's able to manifest.
A great magician.
Yeah, no, it's not a magician. He can manifest.
Yeah,
he's already outside his body, sitting there. He was lucid through the whole thing, and he manifested outside the body for them. That's what they saw.
Yeah,
he didn't do.
I just think
it's just a hand. Yeah.
Yeah, I just think Leslie Kane's a very serious person, and she's not stupid.
Right.
And you have to listen to her if she says this is exactly what happened. And it's not the only time people have reported this with his seances. Many people have seen these sorts of things.
Yeah, every now and then. I'm a medium, just so you know, okay? And I have medium abilities, let's put it that way. I'm a fully conscious, wide open psychic is what I refer to it as. But I have mediumship abilities. I'm just on all the time. And I perceive things as they want to be seen, okay? Most people think that they're looking into the ether and they're seeing what is. No, they're not. You're looking at what's showing itself to you, okay? It's a type of communication, and it's communication in the weirdest way. And every now and then, I will have someone come up to me from the other side, either newly passed over or ancient passed over, it doesn't matter. And they will literally get right up to my face, and I will see them. I can see you, okay? And I can hear you. They can talk to me. I can talk back at you. I can have a conversation with them, and it's generally because they desperately want me to hear what they're saying, okay? And it's never anything like, oh, the diamonds are in the top drawer in the closet in the jar that twists a certain way and it's buried in the wood or whatever. None of that. Basically, it's things that are communicating either emotional attachments, things like that, or the need for them to understand something that they didn't, like forgiveness, back and forth forgiveness. Some people who are still tethered here, and not going where they're supposed to be going, are working on or through whatever the heck it is they did when they were here that they didn't accomplish. And some of them become very, very hard pressed to find somebody to help them get through, to work that through, and that's what mediums are looking at a lot of the time. Sometimes there's pure evil, crazy coming at you too. And I'll give you, for instance, Patrick OBEs, and he wanted to prove to himself that I could OBE. And so
you said Patrick, you mean me?
And yeah, I guess he's thinking about me right now. So it's horrible, but yeah. Anyway, he showed up. I was in Florida. Our house had been peeled by Hurricane Michael, and we were in an Airbnb for like a whole month while the house was being rebuilt. And I had the garage room, okay, and there was another room next to it, like an entryway kind of place, but it was outside open. And Preston came looking for me at what was probably midnight his time, but 3:30 in the morning my time, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I unfortunately was on the telephone with somebody who asked me to do something for him, medium. He knew I was a medium, and he called me in the middle of the night and was talking to me. And while I was on the phone with him, this person showed up in my face. And I'm like, who in the heck are you? And it had to do with him. And Preston, suddenly I look, and there he is standing in front of me, grinning ear to ear. And I said, Preston, I cannot talk to you. I have Robert on the phone, and I can't talk to you. And he disappeared. Okay. And the next day I called him, because you can't let that go, right? I wanted to verify that he knew he was there, blah, 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 blah. And he's talking to me, and I'm just talking nonchalantly. And then I finally said, I saw you last night. He goes, oh, really? What did you say? And I told him, and he said, oh my God. What he heard me say was, I'm being robbed. I can't talk to you, but I talk funny, and that's probably how he heard it. And it upset him so bad, he went back. Okay. But the point is that here's this person, entity, trying to get to me, to get to Robert on the phone with me. She's his half-step grandmother. Okay. He has a half sister who she just died like 3 days before this phone call. And I said, Robert, who's the lady? Who's the old woman? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, she is in my face. She will not be denied. What the heck's going on? I said, she said she just died. And he got real quiet for a minute. And he said, well, my half sister's grandmother died. And I said, that would make your half grandmother, right? He said, well, kind of, yeah. And I said, what was her name? And I said, no, wait a minute. She's telling me. And it was Gloria or something like that. And I said, she has a message for your sister. And he's like, oh. And I said, just relaying the message. And he said, what? And she said, for her not to be upset anymore, to stop crying, to get up and move her butt, start eating again, and be a person. That's what she wants her to do. And he got even quieter, and he started crying, and he said, yeah, this is killing her. She can't function at all. And I said, well, the grandmother's upset about it, and she wants her to stop. And he said, okay, I will tell her right now. And I said, yep, hang up and go right now. Call her up and tell her. And I described her to him to a T. I mean, I had her full body. I could see her, as she was. When she left, she turned like into a giant white light and left. And I think she went to where she was going to go. She wasn't here anymore. Okay. And this is just one interaction I've had in my entire lifetime. And I've learned that when you're psychic, all psychics are mediums, is the point I'm trying to make to you. Whether you realize it or not, you have that ability. It's innate in you. It's part of the spectrum.
I think everyone can do it. Absolutely.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I find mediumship so interesting.
Yeah.
I've talked to a bunch of psychics, and they can always read me. So, but I'm curious as to how you started to decide to, write books about this and really started to dive deep into near-death research.
That's a good point. Yep.
Well, it was that thing where there was only one other book that focused on verification, and that was 2007. And so I thought it'd be a good idea to do another one, and I didn't want to do it like they did. And I talked to so many people who've had these experiences on my podcasts. So I set up Zoom meetings with them, and I talked to them about it. And so I wrote the chapter, and most of the people in my book I have talked to about what happened, and I sent them the chapter before the book was published, and they
Good. Yeah.
checked it for accuracy. And maybe there was a couple of little things that needed changing. So it's most of them. They are people that I've talked to, and those people have verified what I've written. So that's useful as well. And that's so I'm moving on to doing another book now, and then I've got another one after that, I think, in the pipeline.
Wow.
But,
Right.
it's going to
Well,
take
there
me
was
a while.
one very famous veridical case. Is that how you use the word?
Yeah.
That is fairly well known. You kind of start out your book with a brief example of it, where the lady saw, I think it was a shoe on a ledge.
Yeah, she was in a hospital bed, and she hadn't been to this hospital before. I think she was taken by ambulance, and she had that out of body experience when she was dying. And she described a tennis shoe on the roof. She talked about the scuff marks on it, the angle it was at, and the nurse, who was called Kimberly Clark Mitchell, I think her name is, she went up onto the roof and found the shoe, and you could not see it from the hospital windows. You couldn't see it from the ground. It was exactly as this lady had described it. So that's a good case, and it's a very short one that makes the point of how this kind of thing works.
Yeah, that's an amazing case. I do know of that one. So that was so cool to read your book and see just case after case of people who are like, gosh, one that really touched me was where the medic is trying to I think the autopsy room or something, and said, "This one's not dead. This man's not dead." And then the guy's having a near-death experience and sees the actual guy. Drake, that's his name, Drake. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, because that was Vinnie Tolman, and they'd had the supplement because they were going to the gym, and they had this muscle building supplement from Thailand, and they couldn't read the instructions on the packaging, and they overdosed on it. So the two guys both died basically. But he was stuck in the toilet in a burger joint, locked in, and his body died at one of the tables. So the ambulance came, they picked him up, took him away, and he was okay. They got him, they looked after him. But Vinny nobody knew he was there, and it was only they discovered him after a while, and that maybe he was dead for 45 minutes, which is one of these remarkable things that shows up with near-death experiences. And when the medics turned up, they pretty much said, no, he's dead. There's nothing we can do. Even slight rigor mortis had started to set in places of his body, and he was in the back of the ambulance, and there was a trainee or a young medic who just finished his training. And Vinny said this energy came through the ambulance, and Vinny said he was like in spirit form sitting on the chair opposite the medic, and his body was in between them, and this force came over his shoulder, went into the medic, and this voice said, "This one's not dead." And the medic sort of looked around but didn't pay much attention, and it happened again, even stronger, and the medic unzipped the body bag and got the defibrillator. And the guys in the front started shouting, "You can't do that. You know, you're not allowed to do this on dead bodies." But he carried on, and then he got a heartbeat. And so the guys in the front suddenly panicked, and one of them got into the back of the ambulance, started to help with the resuscitation.
Wow.
But then Vinny went on to have that experience in the spiritual realms where he met this guy, and the guy just said, "You can call me Drake," because first of all, Vinny saw him, thought he looked like Jesus, and he said, "Are you Jesus?" And the guy laughed. He goes, "Are you God?" And he laughed again. He goes, "No, you just call me Drake." And he took Vinny on this tour of all this afterlife stuff. But when Vinny was resuscitated and came back, a few months later, he went to see his grandmother in her hometown, and he went with her to the town hall, and they showed this film of notable people in the history of the town, and his face came up on the screen. And Vinny was shocked about this, and he noticed the surname of Drake had something to do with his family line. And so later he said to his grandmother, "Who was this guy that came up on the screen?" and his name on the screen wasn't Drake, it was something else. And she said, "Oh, you mean Grandpa Drake?" So she kind of verified the name as well as him verifying the face that he saw on the screen. And so, yeah, I like that one. That's where it's a different type of verification from the out-of-body experience, seeing something.
Would you say that one of the reasons that you do this? I'm curious about what niggled you as a child to start picking up paranormal books and reading them. What was the catalyst for that? Just curiosity, or do you have some memory or something when you were younger that sent you in that direction?
Not really. I have some weird experiences, but nothing I'd say sent me on that direction. So I remember once being in my bedroom when I was very young, maybe 5, and waking up in the middle of the night, maybe 3 a.m., and hearing a dog growl in our bedroom. We don't have a pet dog. And so I was hiding under the sheets. And I remember that. I remember really vivid dreams of when I was very small, perhaps before I could speak, where I was picked up by these weird pink blobs, like flesh-colored blobs, and taken away somewhere. And I was in this stadium, and they were surrounded by these creatures, these blobs. And I remember holding on to something very tight, and I could feel it under my thumb. That's a very distinct memory. And people might say, yeah, but you can't really remember stuff when you were that young, before you could speak. But yes, I can remember other stuff from when I was that young.
Yeah, you're very lucid. Yeah. The reason I'm saying this is, yes, you are on a path, and yes, you were niggled enough to keep doing it. That was the catalyst. That's what sent you on the path, because you're trying to prove the reality of it, that you realize that you've been living in a reality that's true, and you're absolutely obsessed with understanding what that is. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, and from a reincarnation point of view, I wonder if it's part of a life plan that
yes, absolutely.
Now was
you're doing your job. Yeah, you absolutely are. Absolutely, you're doing your job. That's amazing to me. I love when I meet people that are living the path. In other words, they're going the way they're supposed to go. Not many people get to do that in life, and it's amazing to me when I see it actually in progress. You're doing it. Absolutely. Now you OBE, correct? You've learned how to do this?
No, I haven't. No.
So you're just studying it for now. Do you want to?
I'd love to. I would imagine. I can imagine doing it the first time and freaking out and shooting back into my body, because
that happens.
I talked to somebody who's trains the Monroe method, and they told me about their time at the Monroe Institute. They went there several times and did all these different programs, and described how they do it with this kind of like binaural beats sort of thing.
No, you don't really need that. You realize that you OBE every night. Everybody does. Nobody just lays in their body all. Your consciousness doesn't stay in your body all night long. When the physical mind goes to sleep, your consciousness is free to do what it wants. And its very nature means wander around and go look at stuff and do things. And people see these things happening in their sleep, because you do communicate back to your physical mind as dreaming, and you have phantasmagorical dreams, or dreams of purpose, or dreams of messaging, that kind of thing. It's the connection to consciousness when you're asleep at night. Okay. And so you're already doing it. You just have to purposefully do it, lucidly do it,
I've got a little guide. I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
This is what's interesting to me, because near-death experiences follow a pretty set pattern, where they leave their body, they go down a tunnel, they meet deceased loved ones, they get a message. There was one case in your book which I found pretty interesting. I'm not sure if you remember it, but it was, I don't think I can pronounce this guy's name, Tibor Putnaki.
Yeah, the Hungarian.
Yeah, that was an interesting one, because he reached this level and he saw this beautiful golden city, or shimmering, like, no, you can't go there. This is as far as you get to go.
We see that a lot in near-death experiences, this kind of barrier, or getting to that point where some spiritual being will say, you have to go back. It might be a deceased loved one as well. But with Tybor, he was in the hospital with very high blood pressure, and the doctors were really worried about him. And then a bit later on, a few hours later, he found himself standing in the middle of the ward, feeling great. And he was thinking to himself, "Oh, this is great. I'm cured. Why are those nurses rushing past me to that body?" And the doctor, and that was his body. They were, starting the resuscitation. This was in the early 90s in Hungary, and they'd just come out of Soviet, kind of rule.
Yes.
And so the hospitals were quite run down. And but he saw on the side of the ward there was a nurse's room that had a two-way mirror. So from the ward you couldn't see in there, but the nurses could see out. And he wondered what was in there. And in an instant, he was in that room with them. And the nurse was putting all these things on a cart, taking it out of this cupboard. And it may have been she was getting things together to take to his body, because maybe it was adrenaline and other things, I don't know. But she dropped something and it rolled underneath the cupboard. But she didn't try and pick it up. She just grabbed the other stuff because she was in such a hurry. And then there was a nurse in there on the phone with her husband, and he could listen in to her conversation with the husband, and he could hear both of their voices, and it was almost like he could hear both of their thoughts. And she was getting a bit annoyed with him. Their children were ill, and he needed to call the doctor, and she was telling him where the doctor's phone number was in their phone book. And he couldn't find it because, before mobile phones, we used to write our phone numbers down in phone books, and we had our own little thing that we could look them up in. And then Tybor thought about that, and then instantly he's in the apartment with the husband, and he could look around the apartment and see the furniture, the books on the shelves, the carpet. And he noticed the husband was wearing socks with lots of little animal pictures on them. And he said he thought to himself, "What kind of a man wears socks like these?" But so he went on and had this whole spiritual experience. But then when he was resuscitated, the doctor came to him and said, "So you were dead for 9 minutes. What happened?" And he described the nurse's room next door, the item underneath the cupboard, and the doctor went in there and he found it. And the thing was, Tybor could say what was written on the side, and he even got the serial number correct for this item. And so they found the nurse that was on the phone, and the doctor said, "Do you know this man?" And she says, "No, never seen him before." And they talked about the phone call, and she confirmed the content of the phone call was correct. And so the doctor went to her apartment, and he saw it was exactly as Tybor described it. And when he returned to the hospital, the doctor was holding those socks with the little animal pictures in his hand.
I love this. This is so crazy. You can't make a detail like that. You just couldn't.
Yeah.
Did the doctor do a scientific report or paper on it to be put into the scientific record? Do you know?
No, I don't think so. I think it's 1992, and
I have
I don't know what it was like there. But
this must be difficult for them to be like listening to these patients going, how do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that case was particularly interesting to me because the spirit guide was asking him these questions. I have it right here. One, did you have a life before your death? He said no. The second was, did you live a life worthy of being a human being? Tybor answered no. Finally asked, could you look into your fellow being's eyes with a pure heart and your head held high? And he said no. So the reason I'm quoting this is because it almost feels sometimes like near-death experiences have an intentionality about them. Like this person was meant to have this experience to change their life path. Do you get any sense of that, or is just pure accidental? You know what I mean?
No, I wonder about that, because maybe 10% of people who are resuscitated from a heart attack have a near-death experience or can remember one, and they can be so life-changing, particularly with the life review that they go through. And there's this statistic that 70% of people who have an NDE get divorced because they are just changed so much. And I think about maybe there's people who are very materialistic. They want to have a big house and lots of money and a great car and a great holidays. And then they come back and they say, no, I'm not interested in that anymore. I don't want the money. and their partner's going, well, I want the money.
Yeah, I remember PMH Atwater wrote about that, and one of the spouses was giving away all this stuff to complete strangers. Like, what are you doing? You feel a sense of oneness, I think, after a near-death experience.
I wonder if there's a thing almost so the spirit world's looking down on a person and seeing how their life is going, and they have an accident and think, quick, grab them. We need to teach them a lesson. Let's give them a change in their life path, get them back where they should be. And I also wonder about it being what you might call the theatre of the near-death experience, that what they get is tailored exactly to them, that's perfect for them to change them. And so they go to all these different places, and some people don't, most NDEs don't have the tunnel of light, they have something else.
Right.
And it's a very specific, say, kick up the pants that's just right for that person. And I talked to a lady called Nancy Rhines who had this near-death experience, and she was in this incredible landscape in this green field with the mountains in the distance. And she was with somebody who she said was a member of her spirit team. And Nancy turned around and the whole landscape was just disappearing, just turning into mist and going away. And the spirit guide said to her, yes, we created this whole environment just for you right now, for your experience. And I wonder if that's what they do for everybody. And
well, that would
it's
certainly
tailored
explain why
to make them change.
Some people see Jesus, and depending on your religion, I guess you might see a completely different religious figure. So I'm wondering.
Well, atheists will see Jesus, and then Christians won't.
Yeah,
and
I know
maybe
a Jewish
Christian
lady
who sees
had that same experience. She's like, I saw Jesus, and it's not even part of my religion.
Yeah, there was a guy who saw Shiva, who's a Hindu god, and they see Buddha, and it's just weird. I wonder sometimes if they see Jesus, it's not really Jesus, it's a spiritual being that's presenting themselves that way because that's the way they can get the message over to this person to help them change. Have you heard of Howard Storm and his experience?
Yes, yeah.
Because he was massively changed. When I talked to him, I think he described himself as a aggressive atheist. And he had this distressing near-death experience where he said Jesus lifted him up out of this horror of a kind of hell space. And I said to him, how did you know it was Jesus? And he said, oh boy, you know if you're there. And so he was an aggressive atheist. And after the near-death experience, he went to seminary and became a pastor, changed his life completely.
Right. One of my favorite books on near-death experiences was What Tom Sawyer Learned from Dying by Sidney Saylor Farr. Did you get a chance to check that book out? Really cool. It's just one man's near-death story, but he became super interested in physics following his near-death experience. He was reading all these books, and just finally he went to a college professor and says, I'm really interested in physics. What books should I read? And he named the 4 books that he had just read. I was like, I just read them.
I have a question for you. So as a nurse, you're a nurse, I've had the experience of being with people when they pass and then come back. And a couple of times, more than that, probably 4 in my lifetime, I saw the other half of what people describe. Somebody came back. They knew that they had expired. They knew there was a space of time before they came back, but there was nothing, just a black void, no consciousness, no nothing. And it upset them mightily. All of them have this same reaction to this. Why didn't I get my experience? And I always ask the question, you realized you were passed away, you knew you were gone. Yes, they all did, but they had nothing. It was a void, nothing. And I said, maybe you need to explore that. Maybe you need to understand what that means to you. All of them were atheists, by the way. Have you ever done any interviews like that or read up on people like that? I'm curious.
Yeah, I have talked to one guy about it. There's not a lot you can talk about, though, for if you're doing an episode.
Yeah.
But he said it was, like you say, it was a complete void. There was nothing, absolutely nothing.
Right.
But he was still conscious.
Yes.
And I've heard of people having that in near-death experiences where that's the first stage, and then they move on from there. And some of them say it's a scary place, and some of them say it's a wonderful place. And
Yeah,
I
I've
wonder
heard
if
that.
people,
A velvety blackness, which was very pleasant. I wonder. This is
go
just
on, sorry.
this is just my suspicion. I wonder if people who don't remember actually did have one, but because it's how hard it is to remember a dream. You remember it. You're lying there in bed like that was a cool dream. You sit up, it's gone. I'm wondering if everyone who has a near-death experience actually does have a near-death experience, but most don't remember, because there are some cases where people weeks later remembered and it came back to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. One of the guys in my book remembered his 15 years later. I wonder if, they decide whether or not you remember it. There's a woman who said she was in this space with these spirits during a near-death experience, and they rolled out this paper that was like a blueprint, and it had her whole life laid out, and she could see what was going to happen after the near-death experience. And they said to her, "We're not going to let you remember that part." So they're saying we're blocking your memory on something, but she was allowed to take something out, and she picked out chronic illness. And she took that out of the rest of her life, and since the NDE,
Wow.
she's been fine.
Yeah, I talked to a guy who had a near-death experience, and he was shown all his prior, events from childhood on, some current events, and they showed him his future life. And they said, "You won't remember any of this part, though, but we are showing it to you," which is weird. It's like, why show it if you're not going to? But he says he remembers seeing it, but could not bring any of it back, which is odd to me. But
yeah, it's part of the lesson. They seem to be able to tailor it for you, and it's like the life review as well. That's a huge impact, because they show you your whole life, and they also show. Yeah, go on.
I think the tailoring part is probably accurate, because I had an NDE at almost 6 years old, and I went to a place that I understood where I was, immediately understood. And this is after I left my body. I kind of went up to the top of the ceiling, and I was watching everything that was going on, and then suddenly, bam, I was in this other place. And it was the person behind me telling me that I had to pay attention to certain things in my lifetime, and this is what it is. And he showed it to me, this is going to be important to you. And, but I knew my relatives were right in front of me to the right. I couldn't make out individual faces, but I knew loved ones this passed on before me were right there to welcome me if I was coming in, but they were there to encourage me. And this person then told me that I had to go back. I was going back, and I got pissed off. I was like, "No, I'm not." Yeah, I did.
Everyone always gets pissed off. Bye.
No, and I hit myself hard. I came in hard. Okay. And afterwards, I told my mother and my great grandmother what I saw and what was going on. And they went into dead shock, because I described everything. And there's no way I could have remembered that, because I was dead. I mean, dead. They knew I was dead. He had pronounced me. He was trying to save my life, but he's like, "I don't know if I can help her. She's, right now, no heartbeat, no nothing." And I know that I was helped as well. I was told in the NDE that I was going to be helped. That's why I was going back, and that I had a whole life to live, and that I must do this and pay attention, pay attention to where you're going, what you're doing. And I did. I've obeyed all of it, for myself, because I understood that this was all for me. This was information that I needed, to have. So when you said that it's everybody's an individual and it's tailored to that, I really believe you. That's true. It struck something, I really believe.
I have so many you had one case where the guy was like dead for, what was it, 2 days, they thought?
Oh.
It's amazing because I did
Oh, yeah.
interview a lady who was underwater with her son for 45 minutes. They pulled her out and she immediately revived. Her son was in a coma, but she started talking to these angelic figures and they said, we can cure your son, but what you have to do is have 100 people or something like that touch him hands on and give him healing energy, which she did in the hospital. They're like, no, he's brain dead. He's not going to come back. She kept bringing in people, friends, family, anybody to just touch her son. And he revived, made a full recovery. So there's this weird healing aspect as well. Like real quick, I have a family friend who had a near-death experience. She was very young and had terminal cancer. They expected her to die. She did die, came back. Her cancer was gone. They couldn't find it. So
Yeah, that's something that shows up, miraculous recoveries. And a couple of people in my book say the doctor nicknamed them Miracle Boy or something like that, or the nurses would come and see the lady because she had a reputation. And there's Anita Mojani wrote her book about it, how she had terminal cancer and she came back and it disappeared. It's amazing. And you wrote a book about UFOs and healing as well, didn't you? Right.
There's another weird connection there. And it's funny, speaking of past life regressions, I've got a bunch of books on that behind me too, because I find it fascinating. And people who have had a past life regression come back and they have a healing from eczema because they remembered in the past life they were burned or something. So a past life regression.
I had a client like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a woman, she's in her 50s, she had eczema on her leg and she tried everything through her life to get rid of it with doctors and all sorts of things. And we saw in a past life, she was hunter in a forest and this old bear trap came up and grabbed her leg exactly where the eczema is. She emailed me later and said, the eczema's completely gone now. It's cleared up.
Oh, I'm getting chills. That's funny. I brought up eczema and that's exactly, wow. That's amazing. So I want to dive deep a little bit into the life review. This is, to me, is one of the most fascinating things because I talked to a lady who had a near-death experience and she said what mattered most in her life review was the little acts of kindness she did. And I'm like, what ones? Can you name an example? And she's like, yeah, once I got out of my car to help a little old lady carry her groceries across the street into her apartment. She said these angelic beings were like, that made the most difference in her life, knowing that somebody cared. And real quick, another man I interviewed about his near-death experience wouldn't talk about anything except the life review. And he was crying because he says, I wasn't a good guy. I was a bad guy. I was not nice to people. I was just mean. And I felt every mean thing I did to each and every person. I felt their pain, their lack of confidence. And he says, not only did I feel their pain, they hurt other people because of how I hurt them. So I felt the pain of all the people they hurt. And he said it branched out to hundreds of people. And he had to feel all their pain. And he said, if people knew how bad your actions will affect you, you would never, ever hurt anybody ever again. Just went on and on about this. So to me, I'm just asking, like, what do you think of this idea that we're so connected, we're feeling each other's feelings? I saw that
I've got a number of them.
Cases. Yeah,
there's a number of them in the book, and people have different ways of experiencing them, but they all pretty much say that exactly as you said. It's about the kindness and the emotions, and they sometimes sit there and they see these terrible things they've done, but they may have their spirit guide with them or somebody who's on their side. They're not judging them. Like there's this idea that when you die, you get judged by God or something, but they all say there's no judgment in the afterlife. You go through that and you experience it, and it's really you just judging yourself. And I think this is one of the things that makes so much change in the lives of near-death experiencers. Because Tybor Putnocki said he was awful. He grew up in an orphanage and he thought everybody hated him and he just had a terrible way he treated people. And there's a guy called Malcolm Nair who was in my book, who was terrible, a drug addict. And he said when he had his near-death experience, he left at a party at 2 a.m. He was very drunk. He'd been taking drugs. He got in his car and started driving. He was taking mushrooms. He said he had them in a bag and he was eating them like a bag of chips, just taking them out and putting them in his mouth, and eventually crashed into somebody's house at 70 miles an hour. And it completely changed him.
Hopefully he stopped doing drugs. Man, oh
Yeah.
man, that's crazy.
Well, one of the things that I learned from ETs are, and my father too, who was a contactee, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. Okay, and we're put on this place. We come here to learn certain principles, and there's a few foundational principles to conduct our lives and become wise. Learn all that is learnable, so we become wise, and then we can employ that knowledge and go up to the next level that we're supposed to go to, attain higher consciousness and ability. And he said they taught me that we actually pay our karmic debts while we're here, mostly, because whatever we do comes back and visits us one way or another. Not everybody sees it, but the person who does commit that act or do that thing does reap the reward of whatever that is, good, bad, or indifferent. And during life review, and this is what I remember, because I was only 5.5 years old. My life review was not substantial at all yet, okay? But I was asked 3 questions, okay? And they were very personal to me, and I'm only going to say it now because it's come up and I'm thinking about it, okay? First question I was asked was, am I happy? Am I happy? And I'm 5.5 years old, and yeah, I am happy. I'm happy. I'm happy. I have everything that I need. I understood that need was better than want or desire. And then and it came to me while I was thinking that's the point of that question. And then the second question was, do I love? Who do I love? And I thought, well, I love everybody. I didn't have a mean bone in my body. I was only 5.5 years old. Okay. And except I had one aunt that I was mad at sometimes, but that was it, and they said, well, that's something you have to pay attention to. That's important. Whoever you have conflict with, you must resolve the conflict, and it's on you, not them. That was the second question and answer that I got in the review. And then the third one that they asked me was, what will you do with your life now that you understand these things? And I was like, oh, that was tremendously huge for me to have that said to me. And I never forgot it. I've conducted my life that way. I've tried to understand that I am not alone. I affect everyone. Everyone affects me. And whatever energy that I put out or whatever intentions I put out, I'm affecting everybody, including myself. And it's either going to be good or bad. Take your pick, one way or the other. And that as I go along, because I'm conscious of it now, I'm going to have to do my own little life review during my life, and I'm wondering, does that come through to people who go through NDEs? Do they get those things? Do they actually verbalize them to you or through their retelling of their NDEs?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. They do talk about how it's the small things that can be so important. And that idea of, it's like you said, Tybor was asked those questions about how he lived his life. So I do think that's a big hit from the life review. I don't hear people getting asked questions like that so often. But when you've had that experience, do you feel that in a way you had a much more mature experience? Like the person you were in the experience was more adult than that little girl?
Yes, I do. I remembered my prior life to this one, vividly remember all of it. And I know that I brought a lot of that with me. Okay. I was still somewhat living through that person as well. That person was still with me. Okay. It's me, but we were occupying the same place at the same time. And I was very mature. I was very mature, emotionally mature when I had that NDE. And I'm mature ever since. And I often wonder, because I think I understand this. This is why I'm saying it out loud like this, that everybody has a level of experiential maturity. Okay. Because we all have multiple lifetimes. Boom, 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 boom. We've come from here and now we're all the way over here. And not everybody gets to remember everything or experience that consciously, in the physical mind, but your consciousness knows it. It's aware of it. And when you NDE, there's a moment where you totally wake up. You wake up, you know who you are all the way around. It's like the hemisphere is wide open. You know who you are, and you come right into that. I don't know how any other way to explain that. You are exactly whole, consciously whole at that moment in the NDE, and there's no getting away from it. And I'm just wondering if that comes through in other people when they talk about it.
Yeah, they talk about having the knowledge of the universe.
Yes.
And how they're connected. And
yes.
They realize that every soul is connected to every other soul. Right. And when they encounter them, they know that other soul totally. There's nothing hidden. And it's not like a telepathic contact. It's something else. And there's somebody in the book who says they were in this space of darkness and there was this massive light off in the distance. And they were able to zoom in on it somehow. And they realized that this was made up of millions of souls. And he zoomed in on one of them, and it was a woman who looked back at him, and he said he knew her absolutely. It was a total contact. And then he zoomed back out again. And I can't remember if that was George Ritchie or it might have been one of the other guys. But that's maybe 2 or 3 things like that in my book as well.
Yeah. There was another case in your book that kind of struck me. Randy Schaefer, which was so interesting because there was this one passage where he's describing seeing this golden hall and the chandeliers and jewels. And I once had this OBE where I walked into this room and it had golden carpet. I started crying because, we've all seen gold before. You haven't until you've gone to the other side, seen these colors that are so vibrant. He had COVID. That's right. He had 4 episodes. He ended up seeing his family in great detail. Do you remember this case?
Yeah. It's interesting because he had all those experiences and all these different weird spiritual things. I think there was a time he was in this incredible city and there was a staircase going up into the sky, and he started climbing the staircase, but then he heard a voice behind him saying, "There's Randy, get him." And they grabbed him off the staircase and pulled him backwards.
That's funny. But
during it, he got a glimpse of a man's face and he heard the word in his mind of veteran over and over. And the message was saying, "Tell Madison at the salon I'm okay. Tell Madison at the salon." And then he got this image of a house and a porch. And the guy was on this white porch putting all these red, white and blue ribbons together. And when he came out of the near-death experience, came out of hospital a few months later, he went to get his hair cut because he found this business card and the name was Madison for this hair salon. And he started talking to her and described this guy, and she was saying that's her grandfather. That's exactly who he is. And he did have a white porch. He was a veteran. He used to make up stuff for like the Veterans Day or the ribbons and things for the celebrations.
Yeah.
And eventually Randy was put in touch with their grandmother who talked about him, and she sent him a picture, and that was exactly the guy he'd seen during his near-death experience. But then there was another part to it where the grandmother said, "This is not the first time he's tried to contact me." And that she said she was, after he died, she wondered if he had life insurance, and she came across this business card for somebody who had insurance. She thought she'll call him and just check it out. And the guy that answered the phone was not in insurance. And he said to her, "What number did you dial?" And she told him. He goes, "No, I'm in California. You got the state numbers wrong." And he said, "Well, what's your name?" And I think she said, "Oh, I'm Kathy in Utah." And he goes, "You're Kathy in Utah?" It was a couple of weeks ago. I had a crash and I came out of my body and I heard this voice shouting, "Tell Kathy in Utah I'm okay. Tell Kathy in Utah I'm okay." And so
Wow.
it's, that weird thing there is
That's
the
another one
chain
that's
of
giving
events.
me chills. That's she
She'd have
accidentally
to,
dials the wrong number. Wow.
Yeah,
she would have to have misdialed to
correct.
get that connection to him.
Yeah,
And so
Ah,
how would John know, the dead man, Kathy's husband, that 2 weeks before that misdialed call, this guy would be in an accident and John could tell him to tell Kathy that he was okay?
because there is no
So
space time on the other side. There's no linear time frame, and they see and know everything all at once, all at once. And the connection of us is absolute. I mean, we're all absolutely one together, and we can communicate as one. And that's how he did it. It's
yeah, I
weird.
wonder if he's the one that messed up the call and put in the wrong
you have
digits
to
on
wonder.
purpose.
So, of all these cases, do you have a favorite or one that stands out in particular?
I like Tybor Putnocki because he's got a great story. The Pamela Reynolds one's interesting. That's a famous one that I wrote about in the book because she was, they killed her basically as part of the medical process. She had an aneurysm at the base of her skull, and they call it standstill. It's this process where if they were to operate while she's alive, it could kill her. So they drop her body temperature down very low, and then they start circulating this freezing cold stuff through her, and she is dead. And they have all these, they know her heart has stopped, her brain is flatlined, her eyes are taped shut, and she had these special earbuds made. This is before iPods and things. They were like these wax things that were molded perfectly to her ears, and they played these clicking noises. I think it was 96 decibels, which is really loud, and they're really rapid into her ears. So she came out of her body and watched what they were doing as part of the operation. And then she went on and had this spiritual experience. And then, so when she came back, she talked to the doctors about how they were listening to the Eagles. And she thought it was odd that they listen to music while they're doing an operation like this. And that she got annoyed because the lyrics of Hotel California is you can check out, but you can never leave. And then there's that she described the instruments that were used during the operation and how something went wrong with one of her arteries and they had to change something. And they knew that she was dead through all of this because she's hooked up to these devices. And there was a skeptic who said, well, she probably heard it. She wasn't really dead and she could confabulate and hallucinate things. But her eyes were taped shut. And these clicks in her molded earbuds were so loud, there's no way she could hear conversation or music, even if she was alive. So that one stands out. It's almost like if you wanted to do an experiment of let's kill someone and see if they have a near-death experience, they had it all together to monitor if she was alive or not, and they did kill her. And she was one of the first persons they did that technique on, but now they use that technique now and then. This thing called standstill, where it's like they kill the person to do the operation.
Yeah, here they call it stasis. You go into stasis, and
that's crazy.
Yeah, they bring you down. They have to cool you because they have to keep your brain alive. So there's a certain temperature that they bring your brain down to hold it in stasis so that it won't deteriorate. The oxygen won't deplete because your brain has to remain as alive as possible. And they know if they almost freeze your brain, you're fine. Okay. And the loud clicking in the ear is a way to hit the sinus nerve in your frontal lobe that tells your brain, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. It's almost like your heart's beating. It's an electrical stimulation with sound into your brain to keep your brain aware that it's got to keep going. Don't stop, don't stop, don't stop. And then they lower everything else you go into stasis, and they're on the clock because they can only do that for so long before you actually start to deteriorate and you lose brain function and really die, go brain dead. And it's just like keeping the body in a cooler while they work on you. They can't do the operation any other way because if it's an aneurysm and it blows, it would go into the hemisphere of the brain and destroy all the tissue. That's why it has to be done. They pull it out, and then they repair the veins and then they close you up and then they get you going again. That part's the most dangerous part, is restarting the body to to bring it back up, because not everybody's heart will re-energize at that point. They lose. I mean, they'll tell you it's not 100% foolproof. Out of 10 people, 8 will make it, 2 won't, and it's very dangerous. And people say, well, go ahead, I'm going to die anyway. And so they do that. It's very cool.
Yeah, I heard about a boat that sank on, I think it was maybe Canada, and it was a frozen river, and these children were trapped under the ice and they died, and they pulled them out the river an hour later, but they were able to resuscitate them because the water was so cold.
Oh, yeah, you preserve.
Yeah.
It kept them in stasis, literally. You know how animals have a type of antifreeze, certain animals that hibernate? It's the same thing. They bring the core body temperature down, and they have like 1 or 2 heartbeats per minute, and they survive, okay, in that kind of type of stasis. So they've seen examples of exactly that. It's very cool. That's why they've started freezing people to try to help them in the future, And what I find eerily creepy is that they take their head off and just preserve the head. It's not a good way to do that. You shouldn't do that, but yeah. Okay. Anyway, I digress.
Well,
okay.
There's another case in your, I just love this book. You've got so many different cases and it's so readable. And, just talking about memory, in terms of mainstream science says people can't remember before age 4. We know that that's not true now, because I've talked to people people are remembering past lives. What people think, mainstream scientists about memory is absolutely not correct. But you have this case in your book, Frankie Romero, who had a near-death experience as a baby and recalled it at age 15. And do you remember this one?
Yeah, he was 6 months old, and he's 15. He started remembering there was this baby with all these people crowded around it, and his mum was there, his young mother, and the doctor was saying, we don't think the baby's going to survive this. And she left the hospital and went to church. She wasn't a mother that wanted to stay with her baby, and she went to the church and prayed to God, not to ask him to save the child, but to say, thank you for giving me this time that I had with him. It's been a wonderful 6 months. And so he said to his mum, is this true? Because I saw you, and that was the prayer. And she said, that's exactly correct. I didn't stay with you. I went to the church. That's exactly the prayer that I had. And he remembers how much joy there was in the room when he started coming back, and they realized he wasn't going to die. And he described so much of it. And it's like in the book, she says to him, how could you know this? You were 6 months old, but he remembered all of it.
Yeah, that one brought tears to my eyes, because what a lovely prayer that is, to just give thanks to having had that time with your infant son. Man, oh man, and he recalled this. It's insane. People can apparently remember all the way down to, being born. There are cases where people are hypnotized to birth and actually remember coming. And they always kind of like, yeah, well, sure. But now reading that, I'm like, gosh, he recalled, and could hear what she was thinking. That's, I think, another thing that really struck me is like, people are actually reading people's minds of their family members.
Yeah. This one in the book, this woman, she seemed to be in several places at the same time, and her sisters were driving to the hospital, and they were in an area where they couldn't get any cell coverage. And so they didn't know what was happening to her, whether she was going to die or not. And she said she could hear them praying in their minds. And it was like they were atheists, but they were still saying, oh God, if you save her, I'll change my life. I'll be better, that kind of thing. And it's like that Tybor, he could hear the husband's conversation, even though he was just with the nurse, he could hear her thoughts. And I think that's something Malcolm Nair talks about with his family as well.
Yeah, it's funny because I think there's indications, and I saw some, I can't remember the case in your book, where the people who are alive and are not aware that the person is in trouble sense something. But I had that experience personally, because on one day in October 1984, my mom passed away on October 13, 1984, but she was out of town. She had, a massive heart attack and died. But that morning I woke up and the sun was shining into my room in a weird way that I'm like, God, I'm in the best mood. And at the time I shared a room with my little sister. We had 6 kids in our family. We all had to share rooms. And I turned to her, I'm like, I feel really good this morning. And Valerie, my little sister, like, me too. And we're just looking at each other like, why are we in such a good mood? It was like the light was filling the room. And that was the morning she died. And I always remember that thinking, my gosh, she must have been there. So I think that there's some telepathic communication going on. Because, you describe how some people are like trying to communicate with their family members and they're not hearing.
Yeah, and people do come through sometimes. There are stories of people waking up 2 o'clock in the morning and their loved ones standing at the foot of the bed, and they might say something or they might just disappear, and it's later they found out that was just the moment when they died.
That's right. My sister's friend's mother had that experience. Lisa, she says, I woke up and there was my mother. Found out in the morning she had died. Yeah, that's amazing. These stories that's why I'm so glad the theme of your book is like, let's just prove this to people. Let's stop the skepticism. It's time. There's enough cases out there. People have to take this seriously.
Yeah, it's so much research has been done, and there's so many people who just won't look at it. It's like any of this stuff, they have their fingers in their ears and they're saying, no, I'm not listening. And particularly people who should be paying attention, doctors and scientists, who just say, no, it's impossible, it can't happen, so I'm not even going to look at the evidence. But I think things are changing over time.
Yeah, it's certainly gotten much more popular. Books like Daniel Brinkley's Embraced by the Light, or Betty Eadie. I think that was Embraced by the Light. Daniel Brinkley's was Touched by the Light. It's always something in the light. But yeah, Betty Eadie, her case, she's very religious. She saw Jesus, but she describes these things. The other side is so beautiful. And I know this from having had a lot of OBEs. See, I didn't have a near-death experience, but in a way I did, because my mom's death pulled me into having astral projection experiences. I pursued them vigorously, but I've been to the other side and I've been to these garden realms, and the green is so green. Everything is so bright, it's so embraced in love. It absolutely changed my life. I mean, I will never be able to describe how beautiful it is to people on the other side.
So you're going to send me the document on how to do it?
Yeah, I sure am. I've sent it out to thousands of people, and I hear back from a small percentage. Like, I did it. I had my first OBE. There's one guy I was working with who's legally blind, and he started having OBEs, and we connected because when he goes out of body, he can see. He can see perfectly in colors and all this stuff, and it's helping him immensely. So there's so many benefits to having OBEs. And I think the only real difference between an OBE and an NDE is an NDE is, from trauma usually, and it's a very structured event. But it's funny because they talk about not being able to cross a border. If you're OBE, you can go over into the Golden City, and you can go high up there into realms that you couldn't even possibly describe with the words we have in our language. I don't know how to describe it. It's energetic, I guess, would be the best way. But
I suppose you've got to get used to it. So I would imagine if I was out of my body, say at night, and I'm looking down on the bed, then I just go straight back in the body. Maybe there's a fear. You think, I'll never get back in my body. There's something like that.
I did that absolutely. First few times, I'm like, I thought I died, actually. I thought I'd actually died. So I dove right back in.
You don't die from having OBEs at all. You're energetically connected to your life, and it doesn't sever. You're with yourself, and you come back. And when you are in fear, it does drag you back immediately. So you have to learn to overcome that so you can go further away or look at different things and do different things. But there's a way to do that. You've read Robert Monroe then, right?
I interviewed somebody who teaches their systems because he did so many, and he's one of their registered instructors, and he's in Germany. But he said the couple of weird things about. He said that he had out of body experience in his apartment, and he went down the hallway, and it was a wooden floor and a blue wall. But he was saying actually his apartment's carpeted and it was a white wall. So why did he see wooden floor and a blue wall when he was out of body? That seemed a bit weird. But I also talked to a woman who's a medium, and she woke up standing next to her bed, and there were 4 greys at the foot of her bed. And she looked round and her body was in the bed. And that freaked her out. And she was suddenly zapped back into her body. And then she sat up and the greys weren't there. So it seems the greys were in that astral space, not in like physically.
Yeah, they do that. They visit us that way sometimes. If they can't physically come here, they can visit you astrally. They OBE to you, or they can remote view you actually as well. Yep. I don't know how many people have told you that, but it's true. They can do that. They're just like us, so they can do the same things. Except that they're more advanced at it than we are. You know,
there's a technique in hypnosis called spirit releasement therapy, where if you have an attachment, you can kind of hypnotize and communicate with whatever spirit is there. But the guy who I know is an expert in it says that 10% of the time it seems it's ETs. It's not human spirits.
Right, exactly.
And they find it's like the ETs have attached a device to the person, but it's in the astral realm. It's not physically inside you like you're an implant.
Not a device. It's not a device. They're just able to do that. We're all related to one another. We all have lifetimes of experiences with one another. And they can be clear across the universe somewhere and have an attachment to somebody here because they know you. Okay. And they'll OBE to you to check you out and see how you're doing. They're way more awake than we are. They're more conscious. Their consciousness is wide open, operating on a different level from us because we're disconnected from it, from not using our abilities properly. And so it's not really a device. It's just that they know your specific, they know you, and there's no separation. You have to understand that on the other side, there's no separation outside of this dimensional space. We're all that connected to one another. And if they know you, they're going to come looking for you. And they do. Absolutely. You know, most people don't realize that we are that connected to the universe and everything in it, and that we can have those same experiences as well. You just have to develop your abilities to do so, you know.
I've just released an episode, it might have been today actually, of a person who had a massive download where they remembered a previous life with an enormous amount of detail, but they've been having these ET encounters throughout their life. But this past life memory, they ended up near the death, and on the planet where the life was, where the past life on another planet, there were ETs visiting the planet. And it's like the planet was completely aware that there are other life forms and other planets, but this planet she was on, it was a huge deal that they were getting this visit. And they came to see her in the hospital while she was dying, this woman in the past life, and said, we're looking for spirits or souls that will agree to incarnate on Earth because we have a mission for you there. And she remembers agreeing to that, to incarnate on Earth. And so that's also part of why she's having these encounters in this life, is because she agreed to that, as well as this other mission, which was something to do with spreading positive energy and the psychic thing, and bringing light to the earth, so to speak.
Right.
There was another case in your book. I hope you don't mind citing all these cases, but one, because it was funny. You know, there's some cases they're very tragic and it's like heartbreaking, and then some are really poignant. But there was one. Her name was Linda Carter, because I reminded me of Wonder Woman.
Kramer, yeah.
But she saw the sheriff and saw everything, his badge and all, and saw him later. And starts talking to him like, "Nice to see you again." He's like, "What?"
Yeah.
That one made me laugh. I love how you have a section at the bottom of each chapter, like these are the verified events, which makes it very clear and analytical. But that one's fun.
Yeah. She's great to talk to. She's a PhD and she's got all of her medical records. She held it up to me on the camera. It's like 148 pages. And she's got everything. She knows that the ambulance arrived at a certain time. They went to where she was in the ensuite bathroom to their bedroom. And that while they were in there, she was floating in the living room watching the sheriff interrogate her husband, because the sheriff suspected the husband had done something to cause her to die like this. And that's when she said to the sheriff, I saw you had a bit of a limp and you did this and you went out to the car and came back and you had a clipboard and you were asking my husband all these questions. So it completely flummoxed the sheriff because he knew she was dead. She was in another room at the time.
Wow.
That one made me laugh. I don't know. It's just funny to see these people who are like, what? It's amazing to me. I hope that doctors start taking this more seriously. And I know some absolutely have, but this should be clinically studied in a much more scientific manner. Not like flatliners, let's not purposefully put people into.
Yeah.
I didn't like
but
that
it's
movie.
like
it turned into a horror movie, but yeah.
Yeah, there are doctors who get interested because they have their own experience. They might have a patient who comes back and tells them something and they're like, hang on a second, I've got to look into this. That was Dr. Melvin Morse. But then there was the woman at the beginning of my book, Barbara Bartholomew. She's the first case, and she came back when she's resuscitated. She told the surgeons what she'd seen in the operating theatre, and the neurosurgeon clenched his fists and his teeth and just said to her, I'm not going to stand here and listen to this. And he stormed out the room. And it was the orthopedic surgeon that sat with her and said, well, what happened? And the nurses were still in the room. She described it all. And she said it was really quiet. But that afterwards, nobody would talk to her about it because somebody in the room had made a mistake. And that's what caused her to die. So they were liable and they didn't want to talk about it at all because it could get them in trouble.
Yeah. In fact, I remember reading about a case. I don't know why I read this one. I don't think it was in your book, but it should be because it's very good, where this lady saw that the nurses did not clean the sheets. They just, after she had urinated on them, and just put them in the dryer and put them back in. She chided the nurses, and they all just turned pale. Like, oh my God, how did you know? Oh man. Just it's a good advice for doctors here, because the people treat your unconscious patients well. They might be looking at you.
Yeah,
amazing.
Like patients in comas as well. They have such experiences. And I think the medical view of comas is that you're just completely unconscious. No dreams, no nothing. But they have quite horrific experiences, and they have out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences. And I think that should be talked about more, educate people about it. And I wanted to write a book about it, but there's a thing where people are in coma, they have nightmares that are on a loop, and they're very realistic, and they just go through them over and over and over. And there's also people who seem to have lives on other Earths. There was a guy who was in a coma for a few days and came back and said he lived 22 years on another Earth, and it was just as real as this one. And he said that on that Earth, he did a tour of duty in a war in Southeast Asia, in a country that doesn't exist on this Earth. And he said there were little things that were different, like the McDonald's signs with different colors. And
you're muted, Dolly.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
We live in 12,000 year iterations on this planet. Every 12,000 years, we have a calamity and it resets. Okay, the whole planet resets. And ETs help us through these times, okay? And you can remember being on Earth in another lifetime on this planet, but it's just outside this 12,000 year iteration where it's totally different. And the continents are different because the planet flops over every time it happens. And what's in the water comes up and what's on land goes down, okay? No kidding. And he knew where he was. It was just a different iteration. That I run into that a lot with people. They get totally confused. They're like, I know I was on Earth, but what the heck? It wasn't like it is now. And I'm thinking, yeah, it's a different iteration. You remember way back. You know, think about the amount of time that you're actually in existence, and the fact that you can not only live here, but you've lived. You know, humans lived on Mars at some point. We have people who live in other planetary systems throughout our universe, okay? Other galaxies. And you can live anywhere at any time inside this universe, and you can remember that. That's how extensively long you've been existing, and how much is before us as well. And if they're saying it's Earth-like, it's genuinely probably an iteration on this planet every 12,000 years. It changes.
We're all immortal too. I mean,
yeah,
we've all
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, we're immortal. Totally immortal. You can remember almost anything, but that's wild. Yeah.
We're getting towards the end of the show, guys. We only have a few more minutes. Definitely, everyone, I hope checks out your amazing book. But I also want to flash up your other podcasts. Amazing, you've been doing so many with such great success, and also science fiction. I love. Definitely check that out. Does there
that
science?
One's interesting as hell to me. Just saying. Yeah.
Does your science
that
fiction?
One you're showing.
Yeah,
the one you're showing now isn't a sale at the moment.
Oh.
I was talking to a guy who has books out. A guy called Richard Martini, and he produces a lot of books. And I told him about this one. He goes, "You put suicide in the title? That's a trigger word. The Amazon algorithm won't show it to people. So I've got to get a whole new cover done and rename the book."
Really?
About immortal endings. See what that means. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Wow.
Very cool. Well, yeah. So we gotta wrap it up here. Is there any last messages you want to give to the folks who are listening?
Well, I suppose it's a thing. When I take people through past life regression, if we encounter their spirit guide, which I try and do every session, I ask them, is there a way we can have a stronger connection to you? And they almost always say meditation. And they almost always say, we're always with you and we're always on your side. So I think that's a nice little thing to leave with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming on, Simon. It was really a wonderful show.
You back? Are you going to have another book out anytime soon?
Maybe next year. I'm writing a book about alien abduction.
Really?
Yay.
Oh, cool. Really cool. That one we have to bring you back for. That's like right up my alley. Okay.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much, Simon. And thank you guys in chat and everyone listening. We truly appreciate you guys joining us each Monday evening. Our guest has been Simon Bown, talking about near-death experiences mostly, but psychic stuff and some really interesting experiences you yourself have had, Simon. So thanks for sharing those. Thank you, all you guys who donated so generously. I know that some of you probably did. And we truly appreciate it. We love you guys so much. Thank you so much for joining us. And Dolly, I guess we have to
wrap
it up.
All right. Well, we're going to sign off. Simon, stay with us. Don't hang up right away. Thank you, everybody, for visiting us on the Light Gate on this Monday night. We're coming to you live from the beautiful city of New Orleans in Louisiana at the United Public Radio Network at 107.7 FM and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM. We're on Facebook, we're on Roku, we're on Rumble, and we're on YouTube. Please, everybody, have a wonderful week. Stay safe, be good, help yourselves, help others. And we love you.